Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, and I am joined once again by my friend, and now yours, Kristofer Jenson. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
It's like you never left.
It's almost exactly like that.
Yeah. Now, we just obviously kept recording. This is just part 2 of the conversation that we have been having, so you guys are really the ones we need to welcome back to the conversation. Before we get rolling with more movie recommendations, which is what we are here for. Again, we're not recommending necessarily our favorite movies or the scariest movies or the spookiest movies or necessarily movies that fit the theme of quarantine, because I feel like you probably got enough of those options from other places. We are just going to talk about some spooky movies that we enjoy for one reason or another, and that's it. And then you get to watch them and tell us what you thought, what you think of our taste in movies. And Chris is a good person to ask about that. Chris, if you just want to do a little intro to yourself again for new listeners who are only listening to part 2 for some reason.
Yeah, have you ever seen a sequel before you see the original? I get it. My name is Kristofer Jenson. You can call me Chris if you meet me. I'm a film critic living and working in Boston, formerly of Dig Boston. You can find my work in Scout magazines in Somerville and Cambridge. You can also find me every month in Seaville Weekly in Charlottesville, Virginia. I've done work in Paste Magazine and Newsweek, and here and there and everywhere. You know, that the journeyman life. And to your point about getting to movies later, I should share. You talked about that when you talked about Alien in the last episode. I started writing about movies professionally while I was in grad school. I was getting a degree in linguistics. And I got through the degree in linguistics a lot longer. It took a lot longer than it should have. And I was procrastinating and this is when Netflix first came out, when it was still a disc delivery service. Remember that?
I do.
So I signed up for a Netflix account, and I decided, hey, I'm going to watch the AFI Top 100, 100 Years, 100 Movies list, which is the 100 best American movies according to the American Film Institute. And I was blogging about it, and I knew a guy who did music reviews for local paper then known as the Weekly Dig, and I said, "Hey, how do you do that?" So he told me to email the editor. Hey, I got this idea. That turned into a series. The series turned into a staff job. Staff job turned into freelancing, and that's sort of how I got into the film criticism life. And a lot of it was because I wanted to see these movies that people said I should see, sort of the canon. I wanted to see where a lot of life, even the movies that I didn't care for or I thought were, blown out of proportion, there's still so much culture that sprang out of it, or at least there's a lot of cultural energy that's invested in those movies. And so getting to those movies late, I'm glad I did. And rather than say, hey, why haven't you watched that movie yet? Unless somebody's claiming to be an expert or something, like in that case, it's like you should really do your research. But like when people get to, I'm sort of jealous of people who get to experience these things. I wish I could watch something for the first time again.
Yeah.
I love that feeling of like, oh, that's so cool. You're seeing Alien for the first time. Holy shit! What'd you think? You know, that's fun to me. And that was sort of the energy that propelled my AFI column for Dig Boston.
Very cool. Very cool. So just before we begin, I just want to remind everyone to check out the website, spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, including the ones that are no longer available on your favorite streaming service. You can also find links to all of our social media. We are at spookyasshit on Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas, and there you can join our closed group, the Spookaroos, for all the secret things you don't want discussed in a forum where your future employer or husband or somebody who you want to have, respect for you, doesn't have to know that you love schlocky movies and you love to talk about them like we are going to do. Although I don't think our picks are too schlocky for the most part for tonight.
No, surprisingly not. I'm looking at my list and it's like, I didn't go for schlock at all. That's surprising.
No, maybe next time we'll do that. We'll do like guilty pleasure.
Yeah. Event Horizon is the closest, but even that has some, some non-schlocky components.
Yeah. All right, so listen, man, why don't we just get right back into it? So I believe you are up. So what's your next film?
Yeah, so, the last one, 2 movies that people have most likely heard of. One definitely, one maybe not, depending on how old you are. This one I hadn't heard of until I scrolled past it and thought, what the fuck is that, in a good way? It's called He Who Gets Slapped, which the name caught me, first of all. Then the used to walk through Blockbuster and see cover art, and the image popped out at me. He Who Gets Slapped, and it's this clown face, this tragic clown face, but not in the played out sort of psycho clown. Like, it looks like this man is suffering inside in a way that's beyond like a sad clown. This guy is like, something is actually consuming him. And this movie from 1924, it's Lon Chaney, the amazing Lon Chaney. Like, to watch a silent actor who's an actor from a silent era who fully utilizes their face in that way, in that sort of Buster Keaton way. I mean, no, they're not the same kind of actor, but they know what the camera sees, and like, this is how I'm going to communicate this subtlety, even though, I can't make any sound. What is this? If I twitch this muscle in this way, or if I, gesture my body this way, just immortal performance. Lon Chaney, Norma Shearer is in there. Directed by, his name was anglicized. It's Victor Seastrom, but in Swedish it's more like Victor Hjorstrom or something like that. Is in Swedish, it's tricky to pronounce, and you might know him from Phantom Carriage, as sort of as a guy who pioneered a lot of visual effects, things like overlaid footage, like you were something slightly transparent, and then you genuinely watch and think, how the hell did they do that? And there's some of that here, and there's an emotional complexity to all the special effects and even the non-special effects scene. Basically, this movie's about Lon Chaney plays a guy who made a breakthrough about the origins of humanity. He's a researcher. It's not specific because it doesn't need to be about what kind of research. It's not necessarily evolution. It's not necessarily this or that, but it's something that really taps into something crucial about humanity's origins and some fundamental truth that's going to change everything. And he's getting ready to present it. And it's either his advisor or some kind of colleague steals it and presents it. And he's there watching this guy present his work. And he gets up. This guy is of a higher stature than he is. He gets up and he says, "You stole my work." And he's like, "Fuck you." And he slaps him. And he can't really process the humiliation of it. Plus, I think his fiance was having an affair with this guy too. So just the sudden shift of everything that he placed value in himself in suddenly turned around all at once, and he gets this sort of laugh reaction out of humiliation, and he then turns his life into. He no longer has a name. This is now years later. He no longer has a name after he's joined the circus as the clown. He who gets slapped. People call him he. His whole thing is that he comes out and clowns slap him. And he just takes it. And that's how he lives his life. And he makes him a superstar. And it comes back around that, like, the people, the guy and his now wife come to see the show. They don't recognize him because he's all caked in makeup. But then there's a revenge scheme that, I know you say we should preface spoilers with a spoiler warning, but I'd rather everyone find, if this movie sounds like it's appealing to you, I don't want to spoil exactly how he exacts his revenge, because it's shocking. I was shocked. I feel like I've seen a lot of shit in movies,
I was concerned for the actors, knowing that this was not a special effect. Like, this is not a CGI special effect.
You've seen the movie?
Yes.
Oh, shit. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the actors were not in danger, but however they did it, you think, like, oh my God,
well, you say they weren't in danger, and I understand, like, there's some cuts where you can see what they did and everything, but there's other parts where they're clearly in the same room, and this thing's moving.
Okay, so now did you watch it for the show, or had you seen it before?
I'd seen it a long time ago because, like I said, I got into Universal Monsters, and of course, the Phantom of the Opera is technically a Universal monster, even though he's not usually necessarily thought of in the same pantheon as Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Dracula. But I fell in love with Lon Chaney because of that, and also because of the movie Man of a Thousand Faces, which is about Lon Chaney, not very accurate to his life story, but an entertaining movie nonetheless. And so I did, it gave me an appreciation for silent movies in general, and Lon Chaney in particular. Plus, no one else was watching it, so I felt like I was cool. I didn't realize at the time. This is kind of a weird thing that happens in life, where I was watching these movies thinking I was so cool because I was the only one watching these movies, not realizing that that's what made me not cool at the time, because I was watching those movies. But then you fast forward a bit, and actually it is cool now that you've seen those movies or something. Like, oh yeah, I've been watching those since I was 12. What are you talking about? You know? So it's like, yeah, you do get cred after a long time. Takes a while sometimes, but kids, it gets better.
I'm really happy you've seen it. I was expecting this to be the curveball, and then I'm really happy that you've seen it. So now let's go into spoiler territory, shall we? Spoiler warning.
Let's do it.
All right. Nobody who doesn't want to know or has already okay. Here you are. He sticks a lion on him.
Yeah.
Like, oh fucking hell. Like, that shouldn't be so shocking, but it really is. Like, just his joy at, like, oh, I know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Setting it all up, making sure it's like a literal death trap.
Yeah. Yeah, in that room, like every second you're in that room, and also he's on the verge of death for a while too.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Even when he's setting up this trap, like, he doesn't have an exit plan for himself. It's not like he does it and then like, okay, and then this will happen to them and then I'll escape. That doesn't enter into it.
Yeah.
So he knows from the get that, like, this isn't probably going to end well for me, but this is how bad I want this revenge.
Yeah. So the psychology of this movie is really sophisticated too. It's it's not, whether it is sexual in any way. I'm sure that was a conversation between actor and director and stuff. There's definitely, you could view it as masochistic. In a way I've not really seen too often successfully done in a movie, where you have someone who desires humiliation in quite exactly this way. Reliving his, maybe the John Travolta movie where he uses the scream as the sound effect, where he's like, he's reliving his scene, because that's a huge spoiler, so I'm not even going to say what the name of the movie is, and maybe you'll discover it someday. But the sort of needing to live within your own sins, and not necessarily needing, or not your sins, but the thing that defined you in such a negative way, needing to excuse me, that desire, whatever it is, the psychosexual, he's not doing it necessarily for sexual ends, but he can't live without it. That's a thing I'm not too used to seeing in 1920s American movies.
When you think of silent movies, a lot of times I think people think of, like, simple things like people doing a jitterbug or something like that. But there's a lot going on in these movies. If you can get over the fact that they're silent, or hopefully get to see them with music, although make sure it's the right music. I know there's a version of the Phantom of the Opera out there with music by Rick Wakeman from Yes, which is terrible.
That sounds like it should be awesome, but I guess not.
I mean, there might be moments in it that are okay, but it's something. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to check it out again. I haven't seen it in a long time, but that was the version that I bought on VHS when I was a kid, because that's what was available, in the store when I was looking in it. But yeah, it's something. Yeah. He Who Gets Slapped just entered public domain this year.
Beautiful.
So you can definitely find it. It's on Wikipedia. If you look it up, you can watch the whole thing right there. There's no music behind it. That's kind of a bummer, because silent movies weren't really silent. There was supposed to be music to accompany it.
Right.
But even so, and if you're lucky enough to live near a movie theater where they do show silent movies and they do have a band come in, I think there's actually 2 or 3 right near us, Chris, that do that. So we're lucky in that sense, but definitely it's worth checking out. And to be nitpicky about this movie, I will say this: in my clown experience and from my clown learnings, I was at one time technically a clown licensed by the city of Cambridge and Salem as well. And although I do not clown anymore, and I have known clowns, and I will say that as far as clown theory goes, a white-faced clown would not allow himself to get slapped. The white-faced clown is supposed to be like the boss clown. They're supposed to be like, if it was Looney Tunes, they'd be the Bugs Bunny. You know, they're not the ones getting slapped. They're the ones slapping. They're kind of uppity. But obviously that's kind of a jokey nitpick, but
fascinating.
One thing, listen, hey, you hang with clowns, you learn things. One thing that I do like about the movie too is, like you said, the name is very unique, and you're like, he who gets slapped, what does that mean? And it kind of depends how you say it, and the movie makes it so that you can say it either way, and it has different meanings, but they both fit the film. So there's the way that I took it when I first read it, which is like, he who gets slapped, and then there's some second part, like, you know, like he who laughs loudest, right? It's going to be a phrase like that. But then when you find out it's his name, you know, it's like he who gets slapped. So it works on both levels.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right. Should I move on with my list then?
I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go mainstream again. I wanted to mix it up because I tend to like older movies, but I went with a really recent one, and that is Dr. Sleep. Kind of a controversial pick as far as horror fans go, but I saw it. I thought I liked it pretty well. What did you think, Chris?
I thought it was nice. It went for a very different mood than The Shining. And this is the second time we're talking about Flanagan in this series of episodes. We talked about the Hill House series he did. I thought so much rested on the cast for this one and I think he allowed the cast to do its thing. And there's never frightened, but always engaged was my reaction to it.
So the Dr. Sleep is a sequel of sorts to The Shining, both the book and the movie, in a weird way. It was a book by Stephen King, which was a direct sequel to his book, The Shining, not a sequel to the movie, The Shining. But this movie is a sequel to both of those things. Let's see, how can I sum up the plot? Danny Torrance, the child from the first book and movie, I'm just going to say movie from now on. The child from the first movie is grown up, and he's battling some of the same issues as his father before him, the alcoholism. He's kind of a drifter. He's just kind of going through life. He does have the Shining, and it's kind of a plague in his life. But he becomes a psychic pen pal of sorts with this little girl who has very strong Shining. Her name is Abra. And there's also this group out there called the True Knot. And these are people that also have the Shining, but they're like evil, and they also have the ability to steal your shine, or basically your like life essence. And the more you have, the more they want you, and they're kind of like vampires, like they breathe it in. There's a really I don't want to say gory, what's the word I'm looking for? How would you describe the scene when they kill the kid?
Like right at the beginning?
Yeah, like I want to say gruesome, but it's not like, I don't mean it's like this big bloody thing, but it's
jarring. It's truly jarring. And it's the kind of thing that puts it in your mind like, Jesus, what else are they going to do in this movie?
Yeah, which is a good thing, especially in a mainstream movie like this. Like, you don't see people taking those kind of risks very often, and I'm surprised that the studio let them get away with it. Like, it's not like this is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake or something.
Mm-hmm. This isn't like, your horror movie high schoolers. This is a child.
Yeah. It's a kid. It's like a legit kid coming home from baseball. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that moment was pretty terrifying. But so then basically the rest of the movie is is Danny trying to save the little girl from the True Knot and also save himself. And through contrivances, they end up back at the Overlook Hotel where the big final battle happens. I liked this movie pretty well, and that's unusual for me. I go to the movies all the time, both for work, because I work with folks with disabilities, and sometimes I do respite work with those folks. And I have one guy that every 2 weeks we go to the movies, or we used to go to the movies before all this happened. So I've seen a lot of movies, and then of course I'll go see the ones that I'm actually interested in with my lady pretty often as well. In fact, I just saw Invisible Man before, everything went to hell.
The new one?
That was the last movie I saw in the theater, yeah. Not on my list. We could talk about that another time. But saw Dr. Sleep, and when we walked out, my girl was like, hey, what'd you think of that one? And I was like, yeah, I think I like that one. And that's very rare reaction from me, even just to say that I think I like something, because usually I take a couple days to think about it. But I think this movie was good on its own. I think as a sequel, if you're expecting it to be like The Shining, you're in for a big disappointment, because like you said, tonality wise, it's not the same kind of movie, but there's so much to live up to with The Shining. The Shining is like one of the best movies made, so you'd really have to be a master. And I don't even think Dr. Sleep, the book, is as good as The Shining, the book. So you're fighting an uphill battle already. But that said, it's still entertaining. There's still good parts to it. My least favorite part about it is the attempted recreation of all the things from the first movie. I wasn't super down with that. I didn't like the bringing Jack Torrance back. I feel like they could have gone a different direction with that, because it's clearly not Jack Nicholson. And as a matter of fact, you know who that is?
Oh, that's E.T. kid, right?
Yeah. I don't know his name
that
off the top of my head, but Elliot. It's Elliot from E.T. as a grown ass man now. And it's not so much that he's horrible or anything, but he's just clearly not Jack Nicholson. And Shelley Duvall's not Shelley Duvall, but you kind of let it go. But to me, I think those were the weaker parts of the film, along with basically the finale. I thought it was just a little too servicey, I guess you might say. But I loved a lot about the beginning and the middle. And I thought Rose the Hat is a great character, and also to objectify her, pretty hot. And I think I'm becoming a big fan of this Zahn McLaren, the Native American actor who appears in this film, and he was also in season 2 of Fargo, and strong in both of those parts. So definitely keep an eye out for him. He plays Crow Daddy, I think is his name.
Okay, I haven't seen Fargo, but he stood out to me in the film, definitely. You
got to check out Fargo. He's badass.
I'm catching up on a lot of TV in this quarantine. I'm watching so many movies for my livelihood. I kind of never really had time for it. But yeah, that was the time to watch the shows that I've been hearing about so much. And Fargo is on that list. I
think Fargo's on Hulu. Definitely the first 2 seasons, and Ewan McGregor's in the 3rd season too. Awesome. So Ewan McGregor, he's another one that I've been a big fan of since back in the day. Trainspotting, of course, but really more what made me a fan was Velvet Goldmine. Love that movie. Mm-hmm. Love Ewan McGregor in that movie. I know he's done a lot of stinkers, but I think that he's still a worthy guy, and I'm always happy to see him. I also felt that the little girl who played Abra, her name was Kylie Curran, I think. Usually I don't like kids in movies. Just in general, like child actors tend to rub me the wrong way. Mm-hmm. But she was good, so thumbs up to her.
I feel the same way about kids in movies. And it's not their fault, but I think directors bring them in to say, okay, this movie needs a platitude. Hey, come on in. Say something that no human child would ever say ever. And then you're just like, what the a kid ruined a movie for me recently, Her Smell, which I loved 2/3 of, and then the kid opened its mouth and then it's like, fucking hell, man. And it just it sucked all the energy out of the thing, and that's a detour into a different movie. But it's just it's how much. Again, not the fault of kids. Kids are great, but it's like how they're used. You know, and like the kid shows up and is like, "What am I going to do here?" But if you have a genuine actor, like somebody who knows from an early age that that's a form of expression for themselves, like you have in this movie, then it's actually it shows just how poorly it's done along the way, and you notice it even more, like how good this kid is in this movie.
Yeah. Shit, I had a thought. Another thing I want to say about this character is not only do kids tend to be written poorly and given, like you said, things that kid would never say, but black characters in general, and especially kids, as soon as they come on and they're sassy,
Ugh.
I just roll my eyes so hard. Even Stranger Things did it this last season. There's a sassy black child, and it's like, oh, can we please get away from this? Mm-hmm. Like, even in Halloween 2018, which everybody loved, and I had kind of a blah feeling about, had one, and it's just, it's cringy. But so I was glad that was not a part of this film.
And I am against the notion that doing something ironically forgives it. If you're still doing the thing, then all you're doing is doing the thing and saying that you're doing the thing. You're more guilty than someone who doesn't realize they're doing it, in my opinion. Because you're saying, yeah, I'm doing it and I'm going to get away with it. So how do you like that? No, I totally agree. Like, you see, like, I wonder how those on-set conversations happen between a white director and a black performer it's like, now we want you to be more, sometimes you see in like a showbiz satire, what that conversation will go like, and it's always cringy.
Yeah.
So I'm totally on the same page as you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really all I have to say about Dr. Sleep. Just in general, I thought it was pretty good.
Here's one thing I noticed in Dr. Sleep, and it's not Dr. Sleep's fault, and it's no movie's fault. But when I go to see a movie, the one thing I really don't want people to do is to talk to me, like at all. And I noticed that in Dr. Sleep is when I realized it. It's like movies are perpetuating the notion that you should talk during movies. How many movies have you seen where like people start chatting at a little bit less than like regular volume, and it's just normal? And maybe someone says shh or something, but like, God damn it. It's like, why are movies saying talk during movies?
Yeah. And well, especially too now, well, because, they're losing their grip on everything. So they're like, I guess you can talk during my movie now. Like, go ahead. Yeah. But especially now where like the AMC theater near me, it's mostly dine-in theaters now. Mm-hmm. So you're getting to the climax of the movie and like the person next to you is like, and the waiters talk full volume, they're like, oh, who had the burger with and it's like, hey man, like I'm trying to be in another world right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. Movies are gone to shit, but that's a whole nother, the movie going experience. I mean,
I agree. Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic. All right. Well, let's move on to your next choice.
So let's go on to V. Transliterated VIY. It's a 1967 Soviet movie, the only horror film to be produced and distributed in the Soviet era. And they kind of got away with it. It's based on a story by Nikolai Gogol, who was a celebrated author in the Russian literary tradition. It's a folk tale, but it's really a horror movie. Like they said, this is based in like Russian folklore. There's a witch, and there's sort of, is she undead? No, she's actually a witch. She's pretending to be something else. And it's unlike other movies that came out in the Soviet Union, and it's such a terrific looking movie. Part of it is the directors didn't do anything else quite as notable as this. One of the directors was Konstantin Yershov, who was more famous as an actor. The other was Georgy Kropatchev. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Even though I studied Russian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was famous as a production designer, and you see that in this movie. This movie lives by how good it looks and how much fun it is to watch. You know, it has those classic '60s trick photography moments that just sell you on something. It kind of looks fake, but you love it for how fake it looks. And it, not to say like sloppy. It's the construction of it is amazing. Like, you know, how much work they put into showing creatures come crawling out of this wall, or like this coffin flying in a circle that's not able to get around the salt circle. It's cool, and I'll explain what that means in a second. So, essentially, you have a priest. When you're a priest, this is now centuries ago in Russia, and being a priest or a monk especially a monk in those times, it's kind of just what wayward youth were. Hey, kid, you're not doing anything. Go be a fucking monk. Stop troubling me. And so that being a monk didn't mean like this ascetic lifestyle. It didn't mean you were more holy, and a lot of times it meant you were a punk. And so there's this one main character, Homa, and he's exactly that. He's nothing special. And so anyway, he makes a witch mad. I'm gonna cut corners in the description of this. He makes a witch mad. It's kind of cool. She goes flying around with him on his back, and it's a really cool shot. Later on, he's in this village. He has to pray for this woman who's just recently died. She's lying in state inside the little village temple. And as he's doing that, he has to spend all night with her. And then she starts coming awake and terrorizing him. And it's fucking awesome. You know, the way she's doing it. It turns out that this is actually the witch in disguise, come to terrorize him some more. But like the coffin's flying around the room, and you know, there's all this other stuff. Creatures come out of the wall. They're not quite demons. They're just cute guys in huge suits. It looks amazing. It's a lot of fun. It's not scary, but it encapsulates like what I like about spookiness. Like when you said the word spooky, this is sort of what I thought, and it's in the way that Halloween is the best. This is a great Halloween movie. There's a great style. I wish there were people walking around in the costumes of this, you know, undead girl / witch. It's a terrific costume. It's a great Halloween movie. It's short. It's not even an hour and a half, and it's just a delight.
Yeah, and I had not heard of nor seen this one, but I did watch it in preparation for this conversation, and it is readily available with English dubbing, so you can check it out online for yourself. But I get exactly what you're saying. It is totally spooky in the right sense, and you say it's not terrifying, and it's, you know, not maybe for an adult. But if I had seen this when I was a kid, I would have been like, what the hell is going on here? Because some of the costumes on the monsters that come out at the end are, you know, maybe laughable, but some of them are pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And the way they come out like locusts, you know, like there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
The most disappointing monster, of course, is V, I think, is, you know, like the big boss monster.
This blobby guy, right? Yeah.
Comes out. He looks like, if you guys are familiar with the Muppet Show, like there was like this one big blue Muppet. It was like a full body costume character. I don't remember what his name was supposed to be, but he kind of looked like an elephant kind of guy, like a furry blue elephant. That's kind of what this guy looks like. Or if you're a wrestling fan, like Vader, when he had that helmet that he used to wear, looks kind of like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like that unfortunately was like the death of the movie for me, as far as it being like a scary movie, because you see that and it's like, oh, this can't be the boss, not this guy. That skeleton face guy looks better than this guy. But like you said, the imagery with the witch flying around in the coffin, it's just a really cool image, and that is something that you get in Russian folklore. We've talked about it maybe before on the show, or if I've just read about it, I'm not sure, but it was cool to see that. It's always cool to see what is spooky to another culture too, right? Mm-hmm. I think obviously there's elements that are the same throughout, but throughout the world and throughout time, but it's just interesting to get a look and be like, oh, okay, so like that's their get down,
right? Especially a culture that's as old as Russian folklore is, because that ties into a lot of not just Russian, but a lot of Slavic folklore is ancient. It's still like people talk about their the Baba Yaga is. There's all these things like leaf men and all this stuff. It's a thing I never focused on in my study of Russian, but it's a thing that I love seeing manifestations of it. And there's also sometimes there's not the notion of it being good or bad. Sometimes it just is. Or sometimes there's a good version and a bad version. And that is a fun element for me with horror, is when a force of nature is indifferent to the values that you place on it. We're terrified. It's threatening to us, but it doesn't care. And good or bad doesn't exist to it. It has its own goals, or maybe it doesn't have goals. It just exists as it is. And so I get the sense that there's a lot of that in Russian folklore. There's a lot of, you walk around. I studied in St. Petersburg for a semester, and there's like, it's fascinating. We have our superstitions, and we don't know where they came from. They have their superstitions, and they do know where they came from. They know which ancient deity or like whatever spirit that it comes from. They know they're more plugged into that than we are. Because like I don't know where the ladder thing came from. Yeah, but it came from somewhere. So that's
that just reminded me of the commercials for the Time Life series of books, Mysteries of the Unknown. There was all kinds of stuff like that. They'd be like, "Why do you throw salt over your shoulder? Why do you have to avoid a black cat on Friday the 13th?" And they sold a lot of books, and I still got some of them on my shelf.
Cool.
Just saying.
I'm glad you watched it. There is a 3D remake, and I'm glad you didn't watch that. And then there's a sequel to the 3D remake that's a co-production with China, and that one has Schwarzenegger and Jackie Chan in it. It's turned into a franchise.
All right then.
Yeah.
I will say, the priest, the main character there, he looks a lot like Rob Reiner in All in the Family.
Yeah. Okay.
He makes a lot of the same faces. He's got the mustache. He's got a stupid haircut. It's a different stupid haircut. It's a monkly kind of haircut. But yeah, anyway, I just kept thinking of Rob Reiner.
But like the haircut, even though it is like a monk haircut, you can look at him. He's kind of a slob,
Yeah.
I like the slob priests as a character trope. You get a lot of that. That guy is a superstar of Soviet comedy in the 60s and 70s, which is another cool thing for why he's in this movie. Is that the most famous thing is he's in a movie called Ivan Vasilievich Changes Profession. It's a time travel swap comedy of like a landlord or a super of a building switches places with Ivan the Terrible. And then it's just madcap comedy, and this guy plays a thief, and it's everybody running around and yelling, and it's hilarious. But that's the sort of thing that he's most famous for. So seeing him in that context is even more fun. This guy, like, sometimes he's acting like this, like the guy who doesn't give a shit. He's acting like a character you'd find in a more traditional comedy. And then when he starts to actually get terrified, he's conveying it really effectively. Even if I'm not scared, I'm on board with how scared he is.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Even if you only see, you should just watch the whole thing because, like you said, it's not that long. But even if you only see the scenes, each of the 3 nights where he has to be in the church with this allegedly dead young baroness or whatever she's supposed to be. But yeah, no, it's there are a lot of cool things about this movie, so I'm down with it.
Cool. I'm really happy you watched it.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to my next choice then?
Love to hear it.
Now, this one, I think I'm gonna save a true spooky movie for the last. So in that case, I'm gonna go with my controversial pick. I warned Chris ahead of time that this was going to be a controversial pick, but ladies and gentlemen, I will make a case for you tonight that one of the most famous and highest rated movies of all time, Sunset Boulevard, when viewed in the right light, is actually a spooky-ass movie.
Fascinating.
Now, I'm going to pitch it to you 2 ways, Chris. And then you tell me that it's not a spooky movie. Here's the first pitch. This one, not spooky, okay?
Yeah.
A down-and-out writer stops in unexpectedly on an aging movie star, She hires him to write a script for her. She falls in love with this young writer, and the story progresses from there. Okay. That's one way to look at it. Sounds like a rom-com, maybe. Maybe a Harold and Maude kind of thing.
Yeah.
Here's another way. We open with police rushing to a crime scene. There's a dead body floating in the pool. The story is told by a dead man. We see a young Hollywood writer on the run from debtors, trying to find a place to hide the car that they are coming to collect from him because he has not paid his payments on it. He finds shelter in an old, abandoned, so he thinks, mansion. He gets out of his car, and a creepy old butler tells him to enter the home. He enters the home seeking safety, seeking sanctuary from these men that are chasing him. He is mistaken for an undertaker. The aging woman comes downstairs. She is terrifying. She looks very much like a Disney villain, like Maleficent or something like that. She bids him upstairs and says that he must help her get rid of her monkey. And we proceed from there. Now that's a spooky-ass movie.
Yeah, that's a Cabin in the Woods movie.
All right. So, listen, obviously, people don't really consider Sunset Boulevard a horror movie, and most people might not even consider it a spooky movie, but there is no way that Norma Desmond could not be considered not just a villain, but one of the scariest women in cinema, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe you can debate whether she's a villain or not, but she's scary, definitely.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to this movie. I mean, it's not celebrated for no reason, and it's not just for the Hollywood loves movies about itself, because this is sort of a damnation of how emphatically the movie business has steamrolled mythology into people's brains, and also left its own past behind it. So these are ghosts of Hollywood's past that deserve as much as the current moguls have. And in fact, a lot of moguls built what they have upon what they did. So these are wronged souls. And there's even the poker scene of people from the past. What else you got? You got the space between mythology and reality, people who can't fully grasp the difference. These are all great tropes to use in horror.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So to finish up the plot summary, just in case there's anyone out there who hasn't seen it,
Yes.
which I guess, there's a lot of younger people who might not. You think you're not interested in classic cinema, black and white maybe. But I'm telling you guys, this movie's worth it. Check it out, definitely. To finish up the plot, yes, she does hire him to write this movie for her, and he thinks like, hey, I'll do it. It's a free ride. I'll pay off my car. I get to live in this fancy mansion for a little while. There's a little more fighting in the beginning, but eventually that's the terms they come to. So he's like, all right, whatever. If it helps her out, like makes her feel good, okay, because she's got this script that she wants touched up for her big comeback that she's expecting to do. But what he doesn't realize is that she is cray-cray, and it's only going to get worse, and she does fall in love with him. And that's not good news for him because he is not in love with her because she is such a wretched old hag. Do you know how old she's supposed to be in this movie, Chris?
Not as old as she looks. Or she's
well,
supposed
not
to be much
even
older.
that. Like, you would maybe think, like, okay, so this is supposed to be about this, like, decrepit old, like, isn't it sad? She's such an old lady, and she's looking at past glories, and she's got all these pictures of herself around her house when she was in her 20s, and all that kind of thing. So you would think maybe she's supposed to be, like, but she still looks pretty good, like, face-wise and everything, So you think, like, okay, she's probably, like, in her late 60s or 70s, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. She's 50.
Right.
Not even like late 50s. She's 50. The real actress playing her, Gloria Swanson, and the character, they even say it in the movie that she's 50. William Holden, the screenwriter character, says, it's no tragedy to be 50 unless you're 50 and trying to be 25 or something like that. And it's like, oh man, like, I don't know. Maybe just as you get older, you don't think of things. Maybe if I was 20, I would think of 50 as really old. But I don't know. That struck me when I heard that. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's also, Hollywood's doing that. Somebody can't actually age, right? So there's like any good villain, there are things that's like, hey, your perspective on what is and isn't is off, but also you didn't entirely make this bed for you. There are real factors at work that pinned you into this corner, and you perhaps were either not equipped or maybe you were truly wronged or something was robbed of you, and your response is one that's not rooted in reality or morality.
Yeah. It's like you said, there's so many things to this movie, and a lot of them aren't necessarily creepy, but I think that Gloria Swanson plays Norma Desmond. She really was a silent movie starlet, and her career had, passed basically by this point, although she did live an amazing life, and it's not like she was not a Norma Desmond just sitting home waiting for glory. She was on to other things. She had her own TV show just a couple of years before this movie came out. And she did stuff on radio, and she had other projects too that she was into. She was as they say in Dazed and Confused, a hip lady. Mm-hmm. She was into like macro diets, and like she was like all into like health and fitness, and she was on top of these things. So, but her performance is so strong in this movie and so striking. She's talking kind of like she's like Eartha Kitt before Eartha Kitt in a way. With the way that she uses her voice, and and she's talking through gritted teeth, and I think silent movies are known for the expressions that they have, of course, because they couldn't use dialogue, right? So they had to get things across through their face, and even in the movie they say we didn't need dialogue, we had faces, something like that. I might not be paraphrasing the line, but and she's got a face for sure. She can make herself look beautiful in one moment and like totally evil in the next moment.
Yeah.
And it's a really incredible performance.
And one of the scariest things in the world is to be sitting next to somebody who you're not sure if you can relate to them in the same, I don't know, dimension. You mentioned Texas Chainsaw Massacre earlier. One of the scariest scenes in that movie to me is when they're in the van and they're slowly realizing how crazy this person is. And maybe crazy is a sort of rude word to use, but the unknown, oh my God, I really didn't know what you were going to do. I didn't know what you thought. I didn't know what you thought was okay. And so when somebody when somebody has the financial, when somebody has fully caked themselves into this other reality and is in very close proximity to you, not knowing what they might do is frightening.
And that's a tension that builds throughout this whole movie, because you see that she is willing to do some underhanded things to keep control of this character played by William Holden. And that includes, prying into his personal life, making phone calls. He's a kept man basically through most of the movie, and she doesn't make an issue of it until she needs to make an issue of it. Mm-hmm. Then she points out like, oh, do you know, where does he get his money from? And do you know where he lives and how he lives? And, she like throws it all in his face right up to the climax. So definitely it's everything they say it is. So if you haven't given it a chance because it's black and white, or you're just not into classic films, check out Sunset Boulevard, and remember, it can be spooky.
I didn't watch when I watched it for the AFI thing I mentioned earlier. I didn't watch it through that lens. I watched it more as a tragedy, and it can be both, granted. And so I will watch it again through as many lenses as possible.
Yeah, and the other thing and it's just a great movie. If you've only seen it that one time, definitely check it out again. But the other thing is, like, not only if you're talking about like villains in a movie, again, like I said, maybe Norma you wouldn't really consider her a villain because her motivations aren't exactly that way, but aging would be the villain. Growing old would be the villain. And guess what? That's one, if we're lucky, the best thing that's going to happen to us is that we're going to face it. So,
Good.
yeah. And a cameo by Buster Keaton.
Yeah, it wasn't Buster Keaton's only sound performance, but it's the one where it's so jarring to like watch him speak. And he's dressed up like Buster Keaton, and he's unmistakably Buster Keaton, and he's got this terrific cadence to him when he speaks, and it's a great scene. Yeah,
that's a fun scene, and also anything with Jack Webb. Speaking of people that you don't normally see in this context, Jack Webb is in this movie. That's Joe Friday from Dragnet, and he's like the comedic best friend of William Holden's character. He's, it's not a huge part, but he's around, and it's just weird seeing him being like, "Hey, how you doing? I'm this guy in this movie," and it's like, Jack Webb, like Mr. Monotone, like, just the facts. But yeah, so Sunset Boulevard, check it out.
Cool.
Back to you, sir.
All right. So my last movie. Now, did you surprise me by watching this one as well, the Dybbuk?
No, I did not see this.
Okay.
I might have seen it before. I don't remember exactly. I read your article, though.
Oh, cool. So I wrote about this in Paste magazine. Sort of a mixed thing, because there's this Polish movie that came out called Demon that is, I think, one of the best movies of the past decade, about a possession. Has horror DNA. I think the reason to watch it is not for the horror effect, but I think there's a much grander, like, the horrors of the world theme manifested through this possession happening at this guy's wedding. Poland trying to bury and forget its its wartime reality, World War II time reality, and the Dybbuk takes place right before World War II. It's made in 1937. It takes place more like late 19th, very early 20th century, on a shtetl, and at a school, a seminary for Hasids, and it is based on a play by this guy S. Ansky, who was an ethnologist, a researcher, a writer, a political activist, and its place in Yiddish language, literature, theater, film can't be overstated. This is one of the great works of the Yiddish language when it was still a language that was being spoken natively in Central and Eastern Europe, which immediately after this movie, there were the events that caused it not to be. Anyway, the movie is, a Dybbuk is a spirit that's possessed a body. And there's a lot of, like any Central Eastern European folklore like this, there's a lot of variations on why, on how, exactly how the mechanics of it are, and the, like, is it good, is it bad, is it neither good or bad? There's variations on that. But the main thing with this, so the plot in a nutshell, is there's these two men, these two Hasids, and they're both about to have children, and they sort of, hey, wouldn't it be great? It's not even wouldn't it be great. It's like, if I have a boy and you have a girl, let's have them be married. And there's like a caution against, like, you shouldn't be making promises about the future using other people's will as a way of doing so. And on the way back home from this event, one guy is drowned, and then the other guy's wife dies in childbirth. And so you have these two people who are grown up there's this sort of memory of a promise, but neither knows about the other. And then the boy is on his way to school. He ends up, through circumstance, it's a small world, it's especially small shtetl world. He ends up meeting the girl that he was promised to. That neither of them know that, but he also knows that the father won't allow the wedding to go through. He invokes dark spirits. He directly invokes Satan using esoteric Kabbalah sort of stuff. There's a lot of this notion that, like, there are forbidden magical secrets within specifically Ashkenazi mythology. Not so much scriptural. A lot of this is sort of like culturally Central Eastern European Jewish mythology. And so there's this possession, and it's fucking cool. It's directed by a guy who was an assistant for Murnau, who, look up Murnau. He invented the styles that you're familiar with, for German Expressionism, and a lot of the earliest horror traces back to him. And so you see this in the movie. It looks as good as any mainstream German Expressionist movie made at the same time, or a little bit earlier. Has the same production value, all of that. It's just it's in Yiddish, and it's fascinating that it's in Yiddish. And the scene that I was going to mention was near the end. There's a trial. They put the spirit on trial, and the staging of the scene is like nothing I've never seen it done this effectively. Now, there's all this trick photography, a lot of special effects in this movie, like you'd see in a Murnau film. In this scene, the only special effect is like when the spirit arrives, like it like opens the gate and closes it behind it, and obviously done with a wire or something like that. But the blocking of it, the camera movement, you feel like you're following it, even though everyone's just reacting to nothing. But the spirit's there. It's so captivating. It's not exactly a scary movie. Like V, it's not scary, but it's gripping. A lot of the best special effects come in the actual invocation of Satan. And now Satan's not specifically a Christian thing. It comes from the book of Job. Adversary, that's what Satan means, thus the adversary. It's the difficult thing about this movie is finding it to watch. Now, there is a version on YouTube, and again, it's sort of weird to watch movies on YouTube. If the version that's on YouTube, the first 10 minutes, the captions aren't even, or they don't even appear. So you just sort of have to take the plot for granted for the first 10 minutes or so. But after that, I promise you will not regret suffering through a language you don't understand. First of all, it looks good that whole time. There's these nice songs. You see this glimpse of a life that doesn't exist anymore, that did exist at the time they made it, and that even 10 years later didn't exist. So for that reason, that adds another level of like, I can't believe I'm watching this component to it. And then how good the film is. It's not even just good for like archaeological purposes. It's a terrific film. And I can't recommend it highly enough. Also taps into the like, what's the soul of what we like about spookiness, fun Halloween as opposed to scary Halloween. But then it also has the classic like, broken promises, a spirit trying to claim the thing that it was promised but was never its to begin with. The person who promised it didn't own it. Can you use dark forces that do exist, but can you use those forces to manifest a reality that you want to exist? And then there's the glimpses of there's dances that happen in the movie that are presented almost as like not quite documentary, but as like, we're going to preserve what this ritual looked like. So that stuff's in the movie too. And man, I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't see that one. What year did you say that was from? I know there's a couple.
Yeah, 1937.
1937. I'll check that out. Have you looked on the Internet Archive?
For a caption version? No, I haven't.
Yeah, that might be a place to look. I was just on there today looking up some different things, but I'm really impressed with the Internet Archive. They got some really cool stuff there.
Yeah,
if anyone hasn't checked it out, you should go on there. All for free.
Yes, like it should be. It's practically a library.
Yep. All right. Anything else to say about that movie?
No, that's it.
I'm afraid to say the name. The Dybbuk?
Dybbuk.
I was close. Not too bad.
Yeah. If you ever saw the Coen Brothers' A Serious Man, the opening 5 or 10 minutes is a fake parable about a Dybbuk.
I haven't seen that one either, but I know that I've heard that term. It could just be in my, occult research. I've come across it before, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've come across that before somewhere.
Yeah, so the Dybbuk and Demon, the Polish movie, those are the two to watch together.
All right, so then it's my turn to go last here, and I have chosen a true classic, foundation for many movies to follow. This is all the way back. Actually, I didn't write the year down. I think it's 1932, but if I'm wrong, it's only by a year, give or take. This is The Old Dark House. You can't get more basic a title than that.
Yeah.
That's what the movie is about. You're going to go to an old dark house. And now that's a trope, right? That's a trope in scary movies and horror movies. The old dark house, you see silhouetted against the sky, crash of lightning, all that stuff. This is, and it's got the same plot that you're going to find in a lot of those movies. A group of strangers seek shelter in an old, rundown-looking house. There's a creepy butler that lets you in, and the people that live there are eccentric and they have their secrets, and it's up to you to figure out what is going on in the old dark house. Now, a couple things I want to point out about this. First of all, one of the stars of the movie is Gloria Stewart, who modern era fans will recognize as grown up and old Rose from Titanic. Now, she, of course, had been an actress for a long time by the time she did Titanic, and she was an old woman in that movie, but I can't say that I've seen... Well, she was an Invisible Man, but I can't say that I've seen a lot of her work. And rewatching The Old Dark House, though, she is a very striking figure. She looks very much like the poster girl for like Art Deco. Like, she just has this like long and slinky figure to her. Have you seen this movie, Chris?
Yeah, I saw it. I was lucky enough to see it at one of the Alamo Drafthouse locations in Austin.
Oh, nice.
You mentioned restaurant experiences. They do it right, where you can order food, but you do it silently, and they serve it to you silently. So you get a meal and a movie, but no conversation, no waiters. But it's great. It's this like classic room. I think it's called the Ritz. And I'm not sure if it's still there, but I got to see the old dark house there.
Nice. Sounds like a good way to see it.
Yeah.
But now, I will say that you can tell this is a pre-Hays Code movie. And if you're unfamiliar with the Hays Code, it was just a code of ethics that was put in place for Hollywood so that they wouldn't, corrupt the youth and turn people into ravaging brutes and stuff like that with their evil influence. And a lot of things there's a lot of rules that you had to follow, and, punishment, crime always had to be punished, and supernatural was kind of a no-no unless you could find like a way to explain why it wasn't really supernatural. And of course you couldn't have, scantily clad women and stuff like that. But you get a pretty good eyeful in this movie of Gloria Stewart. Now it's still, 1930, whatever, in a mainstream movie. So I'm not saying that she's going to be doing a striptease for you or anything, but you see her in her stockings and everything, and for a movie from that time, it's pretty shocking to see. This movie stars most famously probably Boris Karloff, although he doesn't have a huge part in the movie. He's the butler. He's mute. It's kind of a Frankenstein-ish part, except where Frankenstein was kind of an innocent character. This character, I'm blanking on his name. Begins with an M.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm blanking on the character's name, but the character he plays is clearly a sinister character the entire time. And he's like disfigured. He's got cuts across his face that they don't really explain. And he is like this big hulking brute, which is funny, by the way, because he is towering over people and he looks really big. And I know they probably padded him up because he wasn't a particularly beefy guy. You can see in Frankenstein, like, he's pretty trim actually, even though he looks tall. In Frankenstein, of course, he's wearing those big giant boots, so it gave him back problems in real life. But in this movie, he doesn't appear to be wearing giant boots, but he still towers over his castmates. And I got curious, so I looked it up. In real life, according to the internet, so who knows, but he was only 5'11", so it's not like he was a giant, But just something funny to me. Charles Laughton is another actor that we might be familiar with. Hunchback of Notre Dame. He had a long career, but probably more importantly to horror fans out there, especially old school horror fans, is Ernest Thesiger. And I know that there is no N in his name, but I can't say it without an N for some reason. He, of course, was Dr. Pretorius in Bride of Frankenstein, and a very, very campy, over-the-top performance that most folks love, myself included. And he plays Horace Fem. This is the Fem family that they happen upon in this old dark house. And there is Horace and his sister, who is an old lady. And then their father lives in the house as well, although I believe this is played by a woman. But this is like, he's supposed to be like 102 or something like that. And he's old and up in bed and can't get out of bed. And then, of course, there's the manservant played by Boris Karloff, who's up to no good. And then there's another family member that we don't hear too much about until the end, and they keep him locked up in a room upstairs for reasons that they get into as the movie progresses. But yeah, Ernest Thesiger, was nice to see him. Very striking looking person, and I noticed, I don't know if you're familiar, Chris, with the TV personality Zachary.
No.
Zachary is he was a TV horror host, so he used to host horror movies and sci-fi movies.
Oh yes, this rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, and he did it in New York. And it was before our time. We weren't alive back then, but he gets a lot of credit for being the first. He wasn't actually the first. Talk to Vampira about that, but he was one of the first, and probably the first like really well-known person who did it for a decent number of years. And he made records and stuff like that based off. He was a big deal. I used to see him every year at the Chiller Theater Convention, and I never got his autograph because he wasn't my horror host. He wasn't the guy I used to watch on TV. But for historic reasons, I feel bad about that now. He's since passed away just in 2016, but he was making convention appearances all the time. Anyway, enough about Zachary. But Ernest Thesiger in this movie looks a lot like Zachary, so I just wondered if that was a choice that was made by Zachary when he adopted the character. Now, this is a good movie. I don't think it delivers too much on the horror, but again, I'm kind of jaded. Maybe if you're more sensitive than I, but they toss in a love story, which really doesn't fit well. But it is enjoyable nonetheless, because I find the woman in that relationship to be very entertaining. I enjoy watching her on screen. She shows up in the second troupe. So there's kind of two troupes that show up. The first one is like a married couple and then their tag-along friend. And then the second group is Charles Laughton, who's like this rich guy, and he has brought a chorus girl with him as like his weekend, companion. And they make a big deal later on in the movie that it's not a sexual relationship between these two, and she's just like, I do like hanging out with him and everything, but I'm really just doing it for the money because he pays me to hang out with him. And she, of course, then falls in love immediately with the single man that came with the first group, and that becomes a plot point in the movie. So I thought she was really engaging as an actress and a lot of fun to watch, so I enjoyed that part. But as for the love story itself, you just kind of roll your eyes at it. Like, really? You fell in love instantly because you shared a glass of gin? And there's a lot of comical moments in the movie, and I don't mean like that it's like funny ha-ha all the time, although there are some. They make a joke about Boris Karloff not being able to speak. He kind of mumbles the whole time. He's kind of like, you just hear him say that. He's not really saying anything. And the first time he does it, one of the guys turns to the others and he's like, well, even for a Welshman, I'd expect better diction than that, something like that. And there's like little jokes like that thrown in. Sorry, something just fell on my mic stand. There's little jokes like that thrown in. And then there's some moments that I'm like, wait, is this supposed to be funny, or is this just funny now because I'm watching this old movie and things that weren't funny back then are funny now? I don't know. But I have seen it described as a comedy as well, so I think that there were things that were intentionally funny as well. Mm-hmm. One I would say there are some very melodramatic moments. And one that comes to mind, I think, as much as I just talked about enjoying Gloria Stewart, I don't think this was her strongest acting ever seen. But there is a fun scene where she is alone in like the parlor / dining room, and she notices her shadow on the wall, and she starts doing like shadow puppetry. But as she's doing it, another shadow appears and strangles her, around by the throat. But there's nobody else in the room. And the shadow appears to be that of the old lady, but we just saw the old lady leave the room and they locked the door behind them. So we don't know who that is. But then she has a moment where she needs to run to get help, right? But every direction she runs to, there's a problem. Like if she goes one way, well, that's where the shadow just came from. So she doesn't want to go that way. So she tries to go upstairs, but there's supposed to be a monster upstairs, so she doesn't want to go upstairs. And then she wants to go to the room where the other folks just went, but the door's locked. But she just, as she runs to each one, there's like this big, kind of silent movie style reaction. So it's a little melodramatic there, but entertaining nonetheless. So you said you've seen this movie. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I saw it. I've seen it twice, and I think it's great. It's telling for me that it's the movie he made between Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. And
okay, so yes, I'm sorry, I should mention that this was directed by James Whale.
Yeah, the great James Whale,
as you just said,
who was a campy dude, and he didn't live only in that side of storytelling. But you watch this movie, and I think it's really funny, and I think it's funny also knowing James Whale's sensibilities. And he, the way he had this wry perspective on sexuality. He was bravely open about being gay, and he never hid it. In fact, there was no effort to conceal, and he was out and proud, and it caused him no shortage of difficulty in life. But you have the man who defined horror for maybe not quite so emphatically, but like he made a huge impression. He also came from theater, and he was very plugged into what all of these small indicators mean, and so it has a very like wry perspective on that sort of thing. So I think the huge dramatic moments is like, this is fun. Let's put this young person in this house full of like all these scary shit, and like, oh my god, I can't go. That stuff is a lot of fun for me. I don't know if he was necessarily aiming for fear. And also Boris Karloff, that's stunt casting at that point. And it's like that's funny that you have Boris Karloff as doing the Frankenstein thing the year after Frankenstein. I see it as like really full on comedy.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy it for that reason. And it's great use of space. I don't know enough about the production to know like how. I'm guessing most of it was sets, especially the exteriors. I mean, it starts with a flood, but I'm wondering if it was, whether or not it was all sets, whether or not there was a house that they actually used for the whole thing. To know, watch a movie and pay attention to like if you know where spatially everything is, and if you do, that is excellent filmmaking. Even if the movie sucks. Somebody with talent is making it. And, you have all these corridors, you have all these floors, you have these corners of the room, and all of them have sort of different meanings and different, like, am I afraid of is something scary happening over here, and is something funny happening, is something comforting? There's, like, the fire, there's the window, there's the door, there's the stairs, and they all have, like, different emotional qualities to them. And so those are things that I really enjoy about watching that movie. It's James Whale showing how good he is with the least compelling story possible. There's a guy behind a door. Oh my fucking god! Like, who cares? There's a guy behind a door, but you still do care because it's told with such energy and such humor and such like investment in big reactions, and like the set pieces definitely came first, I think, in the formation of the plot before why they happened. There's no real central lore, because then ultimately it's like the guy likes fire, like that's the big secret. right? If I'm getting that right.
Yeah, he's not like a monster or a mutant or like he's a guy.
Which I saw as maybe a joke on Frankenstein also. So that's my takeaway from the movie is that it's super like it's silly, and I know that James Whale didn't love being known for horror because he was accomplished before Frankenstein, and he made non-horror movies after Bride of Frankenstein. So I think this was him just playing around is my guess on it.
Check out Gods and Monsters, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
Yes. Highly
everybody.
Fictionalized, but very real also.
Yeah. One more thing I want to talk about as we talk about like kind of funny things in the movie. There's a scene where they're gathered around the fire and they're having their talk, and Horace Femme, this is played by Ernest Thesiger. And now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that was a little tip of the hat.
Oh yeah, I
as
think
well
completely.
too, huh?
Yeah.
But Horace Femme, he's talking with everyone gathered around the fire, and they've already kind of gone through the whole thing of like, you shouldn't really stay here. It's not a good place to be. You should probably keep going. And we can't keep going. Our car is broken, or the storm's too heavy, and we got to wait till morning. And okay, so that whole thing. So now they're just sitting around the fire chatting, and he mentions that he committed a crime and that he's on the run. And they're like, oh, and he's like, yeah, why do you think I live here? Like, I wouldn't choose to live here. I'm only living here because I'm on the run from something. I committed this major crime. And they're like, oh, all right. And it never comes up again. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That just struck me. I was like, no one, that was just it? They just like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we're just going to sleep right here on your couch. Because as the old lady makes clear in the beginning, there's no beds.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely... I mean, first of all, I feel kind of bad that I haven't actually talked about any of the Universal Monster movies on this podcast, and I'm going into my 5th year, I think it will be, after, this year coming up. Because, like I said, that's one of the things... They weren't the first horror movies that I saw, but they were the ones that captured my imagination in a good way without terrifying me, unlike Children of the Corn or... American Werewolf, or slashers that would have been coming out at the time when I was a kid that I was still interested in, but it didn't capture my imagination the same way as these Universal monster movies. And The Old Dark House is a Universal movie, and I love anytime I get to see the old black and white Universal world with the plane flying around it. It just warms my heart every time I see it. Mm-hmm. So this is a classic Universal movie, but it's not like a monster movie, But still, that to include on this list, that's my tip of the hat to Universal horror movies of the 30s and 40s. Yeah. Well, Chris, that brings us, by my count over here, to a total of 2 hours and 15 minutes talking about these movies.
Cool.
So we're definitely splitting this into 2 episodes.
Right on. I'm into it.
Yeah. But listen, man, I dig this. We're gonna have to do it again because I got other movies I want to talk about. I never really discussed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which normally isn't a movie I might not cover on this podcast. But since we did the whole Manson series, and I got a lot of emails asking me, like, "Oh, what did you think? What did you think of the movie?" I'd like to do a deep dive into that sometime. Even though. I'll tell you right now, the Manson stuff has nothing to do with really why I like the movie, which I did like. But we can talk about that. And also, now that I know a little bit more about you and some of the discussion that we've had, a topic I've been meaning to cover, both the movie and the folklore, the Golem.
Yeah, okay. We
can discuss that sometime, too.
I just watched the 1920 movie last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be a interesting one we can talk about.
Fascinating.
All right, Chris.
There, yeah.
Yeah, but for tonight, I'll let you go. I'll let you get on with your life. But I appreciate you coming on. It's nice to have some fresh meat in the grinder. And the problem with doing the show is, if you do the show, then I'm probably going to bug you to come back. So I've already done it. So
It's my cross.
and
to
plus
bear.
now that I know you have recording equipment in your home and you can do the tough part for me, which is getting yourself on a separate audio track. Hey, we're going to make this a regular thing maybe.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
All right.
Let's do 5 hours next time.
All right. I'm sorry?
Let's do 5 hours next time.
Yeah. All right. So can you tell everyone once again where they can find you?
Yeah, so my work, you can find my work in Dig Boston, Seaville Weekly, Scout Magazines. I did one thing in Paste, did one thing in Newsweek. You can find me online. I'm on Twitter. I don't really tweet anymore. That kind of became a cesspool for me, but that's a good link to what I've been up to. I've started a site, burritoandamovie.com, where I mentioned I did the AFI 100. There's the Russian Guild of Film Critics. I'm now working my way through the Russian Guild of Film Critics 100 Best Russian and Soviet movies. So I'm up through the 40s. I'm into the 50s, and I'm doing that for my site, burritoandamovie.com, where I do that and I say what burrito I ate while I was thinking about what to write. So that's the connection there.
All right. Well, hey, dinner and a movie used to be a thing. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. That used to be a TV show.
Now life is just one constant dinner and one constant movie.
I guess so. As for me, you guys know where to find me, spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. And I won't bore you with all the details. You already heard that in the beginning. But one thing I will ask of you, if you enjoyed this show, please, please, please tell your friends, share it, let's spread it like the coronavirus. And you can, of course, leave kind words and kind reviews wherever you're listening from, YouTube, iHeartRadio, or iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it now. They got to stop changing the names of things on me. But that kind of stuff, really, I do read those, and I do love to hear your thoughts and your opinions, and especially when I know that you're listening and that you appreciate the work that I put into the show, because this is a one-man operation over here, and I do thrive on that feedback, and I appreciate it. So, with all that said, get to watching some movies. Here's what I recommend. Pick at least 2 from each of our lists, and then, let me know what your movie marathon ended up being and what you thought of the movies. spookyasshit@gmail.com, and I'll pass it along to Chris too, and we'll talk about it some other time. So once again, thank you, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody else, until next time, don't be afraid.